today I'm going to be showing you how to make a DIY macrame rack that you can store books, magazines, or records in there. I'm actually going to be using it to store my vinyl records, so that's why I decided to make this. But if you want to learn how to make it, then just keep watching. So the supplies that you will need are some beads, scissors, macrame cord, a ruler, 4 wooden slats, and 4 wooden dowels. And my dad actually helped me put this together and screw in the pieces, so I didn't film that part, but I will put the measurements on the screen if you want to make this yourself, or you could actually buy a rack in the store. So for the string, I actually cut 48 pieces of string that are 147 inches long. So I basically just multiplied 7 times 21 and I got 147 inches. And the reason why I did that was because there are 3 sides of the rack that I needed to cover, plus the height that I wanted was 7 inches long. So I just multiplied 3 times 7 and then I just times 7 by 21 and then I got 147 inches, and it worked out perfectly. I didn't have to add on any string during the project, so that's a little tip for you if you struggle with figuring out how much cord you will need. Also, the macrame cord that I had was all intertwined and I didn't want it to be that thick, so I actually unraveled all of my pieces. But if you don't have time to do all that, you can just buy some cord that's already the size that you want. But I first just started by adding all of the strings onto the wooden dowel. So I just folded it in half so that the 2 ends met, and then I created a loop and pulled the 2 strings through. And this is actually called the lark's head knot. It's actually the easiest knot there is. So I just added all of the strings onto the wooden dowel. So once I finished, I divided all of the strings into sections. So there should be 6 sections, and then there should be 16 strings within each section. It's actually 8 strings, but then when I folded it in half to do the lark's head knot, it created 16 strings. So then I just started by doing a square knot, and I left out the first 2 strings. And then I just took the next 4 strings because you need 4 strings to make a square knot. So I just started by crossing the left string over top of the 2 in the middle, and then I took the right string and placed it over and then under and through the loop. And then I took the right string and made like a backwards 4. And then I put the left string on top of that and then crossed it like behind the 2 strings and then through the loop. I don't know, it's better if you just watch because it's kind of hard to explain it, but that's pretty much how you make a square knot. It's pretty easy. So then I did another square knot right next to that one. So I usually start with the loop on the left side and then I do the loop on the other side so that it completes the knot. But yeah, I just did 3 square knots in a row at the very top, and then underneath I did 2 square knots, and then underneath that one I did 1 square knot, so it went 3, 2, 1. then I just took the first 2 strings that I set aside, and this knot is actually called the double half hitch. So I took the first string and crossed it over the second string and created a loop, and I actually pinched it together to hold it while I pulled the string through the loop. It helps when you kind of pinch it between your 2 fingers. And for each string, you always want to pull it through the loop twice, because then it completes the knot when you do it twice on each string. And your working string is the one that stays at an angle the whole time, so you always make the loop with the string that you're gonna be pulling it through. I don't know, I hope that makes sense. So I always cross it through the loop 2 times, and I did that on each of the strings, but then when I got to the middle, I just stopped and I did the other side. So then when I finished the left side, I just did the right side. So I think I actually did this a little bit different than I would normally do it, but it still ended up working. Normally when I do the right side, I would usually take the far right string and cross it over, and that usually is my working string. But anyways, it ended up working out. So I don't think it really matters which string you cross over, because it ended up turning out the same. So when I got to the middle 2 strings, I just continued. It doesn't matter which side you cross over with. And then I actually repeated that whole process again, so that there's 2 rows of the double half hitch on both sides. actually just repeated that whole pattern all the way across so that there's like 6 half diamonds or upside down triangles, whatever you want to call it. And since there was gaps in between each of them, I actually just added on some string. I kind of just tucked it behind and then like wrapped it around and then tied it in the back. I don't know if you can tell what I'm doing. You could also use a crochet hook if that's easier. I just used this wire that I had because I couldn't find mine, but I ended up just using like 5 short little pieces of string, and it just filled in all of those little gaps. Once I finished doing that, next I just took the 4 first strings to the left and I created a square knot, and this time we're going to be going diagonally. So once I finished that square knot, I just took the 2 strings from that square knot and then the 2 strings next to it, and I created another square knot kind of below that going diagonally, and I just kept doing that all the way till I got to the middle. So then there should be 3 square knots going diagonal, and then I started working from the right side, so I created another square knot right in between those 2 half diamonds, and then I started going diagonal that way. So I just took the 2 strings from that square knot and then the 2 strings to the left of that, and I just worked my way down till I got to the middle. Once I got to the middle, I just made another square knot just to connect the 2 going diagonal, and then I made another square knot right underneath that one, and then I worked my way going diagonal from the bottom square knot all the way to the left. But yeah, I just continued going diagonal all the way down. So once I finished off that side, I went back up to the top of that diamond, and then I just started going diagonal to the right because now I'm creating those big diamonds. I don't know what to call it, they're all pretty much diamonds, but I just stopped at the middle. So then I started working on the bottom part of the diamond. So right where those two square knots are, I just took the two strings from the bottom one and then the two next strings and just kept creating the square knots going diagonal. But I only made two because I needed the two middle strings just so that I could attach the bead on, because I wanted the bead to go right in the middle. So some of my beads, the holes were like too small where it couldn't fit two strings in it. But yeah, it helps when you stick something in it to push the string through, because it's pretty hard. I used a wire and scissors just to get it through. Then I just continued going down, and I stopped when I got to the middle again, and I had to go all the way back up to the top again just to finish that other side of the diamond. So I just started by working my way downwards again until I got to the middle. And I just did that same thing where I created two square knots in a row, because that's how the pattern went. On each side of the diamond there are two square knots together, so always remember that when you get to the bottom of those half diamonds at the top, just always create two square knots underneath it. And then I just finished it off, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I didn't want to run out of beads because some of the holes in my beads were smaller than the other ones, so I decided to do every other. So in between the diamonds that had beads in it, I just did square knots. So I'll actually show you that later on in the video, how I did that big square knot, because I didn't want this video to be so long, so I end up showing you that later. So next I just started by doing the double half hitch again. So I just took the two middle strings, and the one that's on the right is actually my working string, so I just crossed it over the next one, and I always just took the string that was next to it and just wrapped it around twice for each string to complete the knot. And then I just went all the way down to the left, and then I did the same thing on the right side. I just went all the way down to the right so that they're both diagonal and it forms kind of like a triangle in a way. And then once I finished both sides, I just repeated it again. So that's kind of the pattern. I always did 2 rows of the double half hitch on both sides. So next I just added a square knot right in the middle, and then I did 2 square knots right underneath that one, and then I did 3, and then I did 2 and 1, so it goes 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. It kind of forms a diamond. And then after I was done doing all the square knots, I just completed the diamond by adding the double half hitch around it, so it kind of just like frames it all in. So I just did 2 rows on each side, just like how I did at the top, but instead I kind of just did like an upside down triangle. And then once I was finished with that one, I just added 5 more, so that there is 6 diamonds total. So I didn't film this next part. I was just trying to show that I did 3 rows of that same pattern that we did in the second row where I added those beads. So I basically just did that same pattern for like the under part that you don't really see. I obviously didn't add beads right there because that's just where my records are gonna sit, so nobody's gonna really see that. But yeah, I just showed in that little clip how I did the square knot in the middle. I don't know if you've seen that, but you can always go back and look at it. But I just added 3 rows for the underneath part. If you don't want it to sit so low, you can just do 2 rows instead, but I just decided to do 3. And then after I finished that, here I'm just doing the double half hitch again. So we're basically working on the other side of the rack now. So I'm actually just repeating the same pattern, but instead of doing the pattern like how we did starting from the top, we're actually working from the bottom to the top instead. So I started with the pattern that we finished with at the bottom on the other side, because when you flip it, that's just how it's gonna be. Hopefully you understand that. But yeah, so I basically was just creating those same diamonds where I did the 2 rows of the double half hitch, and then I put 1 square knot in the middle, then 2, then 3, then 2, and then 1 again, and then I ended it with 2 more rows of the double half hitch to complete the diamond. So yeah, I'm sure you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I actually had to move my rack to sit on top of my nightstand for this part because it was getting so low to the ground that you wouldn't be able to tell what I was doing. So that's why the background looks different. But anyways, I just did that all the way across. So after I finished doing all of that, the diamonds that I just finished with, they take like so long to do. But anyways, I started working on the pattern that we did in the second row with the beads. So I just started by doing the square knots going diagonally, and I don't think I'm gonna explain it all in detail since I already did the first time, so I'm sure you could just watch and figure it out. But I ended up doing the beads every other again, and then the square knots in between. So yeah, that's pretty much all I did for this row. So next, this part was a little bit confusing. It's kind of like how I first started it at the very beginning, that same design, except I had to flip it so that it was upside down. So before, it was like an upside down triangle with 2 rows of the double half hitch, but this time it's gonna be like right side up, so that when you flip it, then it ends up being upside down again, like how it was. Hopefully that makes sense, but yeah, you can just follow what I'm doing here. I just worked downwards going diagonal from the middle all the way to the left, and then I did the right side, and then I added another row for both sides. And then once I was finished with that, I did a square knot right in the middle, and then I did 2 more square knots right underneath that one, and then 3 square knots. And then that was it. So it's kind of like a half diamond. And then I just did 5 more of those going all the way across, and that's pretty much the end of the whole pattern. So then all that's left to do is connect it to the other side. So as you can see, I'm just pulling it through, and then once you flip it, it does end up being like an upside down triangle. So that's what I meant by that when I was explaining. So to connect it to the other side, you're actually just going to put the string over and then put it back under again, and then put it through the loop. It's probably just easier to watch what I'm doing, but I had like a really hard time with this. This is the first time that I've ever made something like this. Normally I only make like wall hangings or plant hangings, I don't know what they're called, but I had to watch like a YouTube video to figure out that step. So hopefully you could see what I was doing. and then I just cut off all the ends. I actually had some string left over, so I didn't have to add on any string throughout this whole project, which is good because I don't like having to do that. Not that it looks junky or anything, but I don't know, sometimes it could look junky unless you like tuck it behind real well. But then I just pulled it through to the back so that I could just tie a knot so that you won't be able to see it. I don't know, it's up to you. You could just tuck it in somewhere, but that was just like easier and faster for me to do, so that's what I ended up doing. Also, I have seen some people add like a square knot thing at the bottom of the rack so that it stays in place. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but I decided not to do that because I wanted to open and close mine. But yeah, it's finally finished. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give this a like and subscribe. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.